Question 22 says that the length of a rectangle is 5 inches longer than the width. The perimeter of the rectangle is 40 inches. What is the width of the rectangle in inches? And as answers, we have numbers from 7.5 to 17.5. There's a relationship of doubling going on here, so between F and H, and also between G and J. So we'll want to be careful about doubling or halving here, since it seems like it might be a common mistake that they're predicting. As far as the ACT math concepts, we're dealing with perimeter and rectangle, and also potentially some algebra if we write an expression relating the length and the width together. There are a couple of different ways we can solve this question, so I'm going to write those out up here. Approaches, and we're going to have a concrete way, which is going to be to test out answers. And then the second way, which will be the formal way, which is to use algebra and set up an equation. So let's start with the concrete way first, and when testing answers, I like to start with a middle number and then adjust accordingly. So in using this approach, we're basically going to assume that the correct answer is 15 and that the width of the rectangle is 15 inches. And as a first step here, I'm just going to sketch out a rectangle. So we have a basic thing in front of us to look at. And we're told, okay, so the length is 5 inches longer than the width. So let's make this side be the length side, and then we'll make this be the width. And since we're going to assume that 15 is the width, I'll go ahead and label that. And if that is the width, then we're also going to have this side be 15. Now we're told that the length is 5 inches longer than the width, so the length will be 20 in this situation, and this will also be 20. And now to continue to check this, we're going to want to find the perimeter, because we're told that the perimeter is 40 inches. So if we try to add these up, we can already see here that the perimeter is going to be more than 40 inches, because just adding these lengths together, we're going to get 40. In fact, it'll be 40 plus 15 plus 15, which is 60. So this is going to be too big as an answer. Let's go ahead and try the next smallest answer, which is 8. I'm going to cross this out just to indicate we're not going to use that anymore. And we're going to now assume that the width is 8. So we'll write that 8, 8. And again, the length is 5 inches longer. So that's going to be 8 plus 5, which is 13. This is 13. This is 13. Let's again check for the perimeter. So 13 plus 13 is 26, plus 8 plus 8. So that's going to be 26 plus 16. And that is going to be a 42, which again is going to be longer than what we want as a perimeter. So that's gone. And now at this point, 7.5 is the only answer that's left that's smaller. Rather than circling it at this point, I would still plug it in just to make sure I haven't made any mistakes in any of my other calculations. So we'll cross these out again, and then we'll say that the width is 7.5, which makes this side over here 7.5, and 5 plus 7.5 is going to be 12.5 for the length. And now let's go ahead and add these up. 12.5 plus 12.5 is 25, and then 7.5 plus 7.5 is 15. So we have 25 plus 15, right? And then this is going to add up to 40, which is the perimeter of 40 inches. So this is going to be correct. I'm going to go ahead and clear this out, and we'll solve it in the more formal way, which, as I mentioned earlier, is to set up some algebraic equations. So we were told in the beginning that the length is 5 inches longer than the width. So we can express that using variables. We can say the length is 5 plus whatever the width is. And sometimes this is a point of confusion for some students when setting up this equation, because it seems like, well, if the length is 5 bigger than the width, shouldn't the 5 go over here with the L? But the way we want to look at this is that basically the width is smaller than the length. And so we're going to have to add 5 to that width to get it to be the same size as the length. And so if you have trouble with that, just stare at that for a while, think about what these letters actually mean, and then this will make more sense. Now again, at this point, I'm going to sketch out a picture so we have something tangible to work with. We're going to say that this is the length and this is the width. And we know that the length, as we wrote up here, is the same as 5 plus W. And I'm going to also label this side W because it's going to be the same as this W over here. And this side will be 5 plus W since it's the same as the length up there. And what we can do now, since we're trying to figure out what the width is we can think about what sort of equation we can set up with this information here. And going back to the prompt, we were told that the perimeter is 40, and perimeter is just the sum of all the sides of a shape. So we can make an equation here. We'll just add 5 plus w for this first side, plus the w here, plus the 5 plus w down there, plus the remaining w. And we know that all those sides are going to add up to 40. And so when we simplify this, we can combine like terms. We have 4 w's that we're adding together, so we can write 4w. We have these 2 5's that we're adding, so it'll be 10 is equal to 40. And then subtracting 10 from both sides, we get that 4w is equal to 30. And then dividing by 4 on both sides to get w by itself, we get that w is equal to 7.5. And so that confirms the answer that we got earlier. Let's take a look at some of the wrong answers now. For answer choice H of 15, that could reflect getting the width as 7.5 like we just did, but then instead of just going with that as an answer, thinking that we had to add all the widths together, and so we would get 7.5 plus another 7.5 for 15. And the reason why that's not correct is because when they ask for the width of a rectangle, they're just referring to the value of this one letter as opposed to the sum of all the widths of the shape. Another possibly common mistake here is for 17.5, which could reflect thinking that the perimeter is just the width plus the length, as opposed to being the width plus the length plus the width plus the length again. And if we just had this equation of width plus length, then what would happen, knowing that L is equal to 5 plus W, we would have W plus 5 plus W. And then plugging in what we know, that the perimeter is 40, we would have this equation. Combining like terms, we get 2W plus 5, subtracting 5 from both sides, 35 is equal to 2W, and so W would be 17.5. But again, the correct formula for perimeter of a rectangle is 2 times W plus 2 times L, because we want to add up all the sides. And then for answer choice G, I'm not entirely sure how they came up with that answer. It's possible that someone could misread this question if they're reading it really quickly and basically read this as just the length is 5 instead of being 5 inches longer than the width, and then also think that the perimeter is the area for some reason. Because if we thought that the length were 5 and that the area were 40, then basically we would have length times width to get the area. So it'd be L times W equals 40. So 5 times W is 40, and that would give us W is equal to 8. And that might also explain why J is there, in the sense that this could reflect that similar mistake we saw in H of basically taking the width and then adding it to the other width to get 16. All right, and finally, let's think about what we ultimately needed to know for this question. So I'll write it out right here. Ultimately needed to know, and if we solved it concretely, we saw that really the only math concept we needed there was perimeter. If we did it in a formal way, then we had to understand how to set up this expression relating L and W together, and basically how to solve an algebraic equation. And finally, as far as ultimate takeaways for this question, there are a couple. One is, again, this equation relating L and W. As I mentioned, that can be somewhat counterintuitive, but it does appear every once in a while on the ACT, so you'd want to get familiar with how to do that. And then the last thing is that this question follows a general pattern where they haven't given us a picture, and we see that some of these answers can kind of catch mistakes related to not having like a visual in front of us. For example, we saw that K of 17.5 can come from just adding the width and the length together, but if you have a picture in front of you with all the sides labeled, it's a little bit harder to make a mistake like that, because then you see that you have all these sides that you do need to add up to get the total perimeter. All right, so let's go on to question 23.